Good morning. I hope you guys are having a great day. All right, so here's what we're doing. We are stretching and shrinking. Okay, that just means we're getting closer or further away from our axes. So let's go down here and look. Okay, this gives us a real simple outline. It's also written above. It tells us a shrink. Horizontal shrink gets closer to the y-axis. That's right here. Look how close that line is to the y-axis. Okay, that's a shrink. And then we have a stretch. Okay, and look at this red line. Look how much further this arrow is from the y-axis. That's why it stretches away. We have that same concept for stretching and shrinking from the x-axis. Okay, this x, this red, gets closer to the x-axis, so that's a shrink. And this blue gets further from the x-axis, so that's a stretch. So we're getting farther, stretching away from an axis, or we're shrinking closer to an axis. Okay, so how do we know? By looking at our function what it's doing. Okay, so for horizontal transformations up in this left corner, we have a function where x is being multiplied. So we have an a times an x, or it could also look like an f with something times x on the inside. Okay, so when we're messing around with x, it's horizontal. Okay, we can also multiply f of x by something, so that is vertical. So this may be a number a times f of x, and that is on the outside. Okay, so a horizontal shrink, okay, it's shrinking closer to the y-axis. And that is when we're multiplying x by a number greater than 1. A horizontal stretch, our y-axis is here, it's stretching further away. So we are multiplying by a fraction or decimal that's between 0 and 1. Now we're on to our vertical shrink. So this is when we're multiplying y by a fraction. Now our stretch is when we multiply y by a number greater than 1. Okay. So you're going to want to reference back to all of these little graphics for us. And now we're going to learn to graph and describe. So every time we need to get into this rhythm of looking at the new function they give us, like g of x or h of x, referencing back to our parent function, and either filling in the table or using our slope and y-intercept. Okay, so looking at a, we have 1/3 times the x, so it's multiplying by x, so we automatically know it is horizontal. Okay, now is it a shrink or a stretch? Well, that is a fraction. So a fraction multiplying by x right here is a stretch. So because it horizontally stretches out, it's going to get farther and farther away from that y-axis. So I'm going to write a note away from y-axis. Okay, now if we apply that 1/3 smushed with x, we can get a g of x equals 1/3 x minus 1. So that's our new function. Or we can use our table. So our first step is to plug in x with 1/3. So we get -1, 0, and 1. Okay, now we have to take that first step and plug it in to our parent function. -1 minus 1 gives us -2, -1, and 0. Okay, now real quick, I'm going to graph our parent function so we can see the difference. Going to -1, going 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. And here is our parent function. Okay, if this is a horizontal stretch, the distance between the arrow and y-axis should get further. Let's check it out. So we have our x values here, our final y values here, -3, -2, 0, -1. Oh, look, they have that same y-intercept. And 3 and 0. So look at how far that is from the y-axis. Now that's what you call a stretch for sure. All right. Okay. Now we are on to h of x right here for b. And that's a 3. That's a number multiplying the function, so we know that's vertical. Okay. And it's greater than 1, so we know this is incorrect. We know a is greater than 1, so that's a stretch. And if it's going to be a stretch, it's going to be a stretch away from the x-axis. Okay, so there are two ways we can go about this. We can multiply 3 times our whole function. We can take 3, and our whole function is x minus 1. So now we have h of x, and that equals 3x minus 3. Or we can take our first step by plugging it into our function. 0 minus 1 is -1. Then we have 0, and we have 1. And our final step is to multiply this by 3. We get -3, 0, and 3. I'm going to graph our parent function. We're at 0, -1, 1, 0, 2, 1. Okay, notice that x-intercept is at 1. Okay, so now we're going to graph our new function. Let's label this f of x. So we have 0, -3. And we have 1, 0. Look, we have the same x-intercept. We have 2, 3. So this is supposed to be a stretch away from the x-axis. And look at that. That is much further from the x-axis. Okay. Our next example. So we have a parent function of x plus 2. Now we have to do our transformation to g of x and h of x. So if we're looking at a, we have a number times x. It's stuck in there in the parentheses, so we know this is horizontal. And it is greater than 1. So what do we remember that one? It is a horizontal, it's greater than 1. It is a shrink. So this is going to be a horizontal shrink. And our first step's already done here. We multiplied by 4. Now we got to do our first step, plug it in. So -4 plus 2 is -2. 0 plus 2 is 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. Of course, our other option was going to be to take 4x and plug it in. So then we would have g of x equals 4x plus 2. And you can use the slope and the y-intercept to graph, or we can use our table here. So we're going to graph, let's move down, -1, -2, 0, 2, that same y-intercept, and 1, 6. Okay, so this is supposed to be a shrink, and a shrink closer to the y-axis. So look how much closer that red line is to y than that black one. Right. Now we're going to go on to b. So this is 1/4. It's outside of the function. It's being multiplied outside of those parentheses. So this is vertical. Okay. And it is a number between 0 and 1, a fraction. So this is also going to be a shrink. Okay. Because it's a vertical shrink, it's either going to get further, well, it's going to get closer to our x-axis. Just for your reference, this horizontal got closer to y-axis. Okay. So our parent function was drawn, and now I'm going to adjust our function. So our function's x plus 2, and it's times 1/4. So if you multiply that on the outside of x plus 2, what we should get is 1/4 x plus, let's see, 2 times 1/4, that is 1/2. Okay, so you can either graph that, or we can go back to our table. So first we plug these points into f of x, which is x plus 2. We get -2 plus 2, which is 0. Then we keep on going, and we get 2 and 4. Now we have to multiply 1/4 times that. We get 0. We get 1/2. And then we get 1. Okay, and now all we gotta do is graph. So let's go to -2, 0. See how they have that same x-intercept? 0, 1/2, that's here. And then 2, 1, that's here. So that is a very small slope. Now that's supposed to be closer to the x-axis, so look at this distance. That's so far, and this shrink is so much closer. Okay, so for these, what I need you to do is either plug these in or multiply it to the outside and use your slope or y-intercept, or you can use your table and just mimic the tables up here and take your steps. Okay, there's also going to be a check for you guys to do. Okay, email me your questions when you're working.